Good evening. How do you create magic in your own life? And where do you find stories that are deep and old and meaningful and ancient? And why are stories like this important to you in your modern day life? Well, I'm Sarah Bullen. I'm a writing coach. I'm a literary agent and I run retreats. And I'm sitting with Niall Campbell, who will introduce himself in a second. And we're going to be talking about this evening with you. We're going to be talking about stories, old stories, stories from the earth, and why really these are becoming so important and relevant. Niall, maybe just say a few words about yourself and where you are right now.
Yeah, so for me, I mean, right now I'm calling from Botswana, and I'm actually in the bush. I've come into town to make this recording, and I'm in the bush in the place where I grew up, where people still live a semi-traditional lifestyle. And I'm hanging a lot with old people and people who know the stories, and who have a way of telling stories, which is very exciting to me. It's something that I grew up with, and it's something that it's a huge part of my life. It's also a huge part of my work, is listening to these stories and gathering. This is an oral culture. People here don't write. Writing came with the Western education system. So all the old stories and all the old history has been recorded by people in their memories. And the stories they are not literal, they're not factual. They do contain a lot of fact, but they are full of mystery. They're full of mystique. In one point in a story, suddenly the animals will start talking, the birds will start saying things. The cultural heroes will arrive out of nowhere and be part of the story. And it's even when a person is narrating his own life story that you get this kind of thing. So I'm very excited to be here. I'm absolutely loving it. It's the best time of year. These stories are amazing, Sarah. So yeah, this is what I'm doing right now.
Beautiful. So, I mean, this question of telling stories and storytelling is, of course, close to my heart because I work with writers on story and their stories. And I think one of the reasons we have chosen to go away with a group of people is to investigate in a very deep way the power of story and how, when you disconnect from your modern and everyday life, can you maybe connect with something that's older. And that I've really found repeatedly over many years of going on retreats with writers and inviting them to just be in an immersion, in a process of creativity and story. And Niall, I think what I wanted to ask you as well, and Niall and I have known each other for many years, we're old friends, and we've had these discussions over many late nights around many fires. So we're also just inviting you to come and join these discussions with us. But what I'm interested in, Niall, is what makes a story important as opposed to just something somebody's telling at a dinner party, because we can all be storytellers. But are there special stories? Are there important stories there?
They're important stories. And as I was saying earlier, especially when you are immersed in an oral culture, the potency of stories is recorded in the way that they're told. And there's a certain way that people hear a story that draws you in. First of all, it takes you out of your norm. It takes you away from your everyday humdrum life. It draws you into something. It's a little bit like Alice in Wonderland. You're down a rabbit hole. And the person telling the story is kind of your guide, but also something who's running 20 paces ahead of you and into this mysterious world where anything can happen. And you go down there and you go in there and you find yourself in this absolutely amazing place. From there, the power of the story can really take a hold of you. Now, the power of the story is that these stories, they change you. It's like when you read a really good novel, you're going to find yourself thinking about it constantly. You're going to find yourself as a part of it. These stories have that potency, and I find actually even more, because they take you down into this place, and then they take you into a realm where, we modern people, we don't really communicate with nature that much. But in these stories, communication with nature it's absolutely normal. You find yourself communicating with nature. You find yourself listening to the feedback that nature is giving you, and actually in communion with a whole expanded world. And so the potency and power of these stories is that when then things are dropped into them, those things have a potency on us as individuals. They change us. We come out of a story like that with a change in our way of looking at life, and our way of receiving life. I think my belief, and we were talking about this at another time, Sarah, is that there's a certain essence of life force which comes out of these things, which we don't get in our modern world. We don't encounter it in our jobs, in our day-to-day world, in the world of entertainment and those kind of things. But in these old stories, there is that life force, and you feel it surging through your body, and you come out of that and you feel like, wow, I really am alive, and I'm alive in an expanded universe. So I think I'm very excited working with this, I must say. I'm very excited to be with other people and explore this in a more modern context. How do we bring this kind of a flavor and essence into the modern world where we actually, many of us don't believe that they are these kind of things. We don't believe in mystery. We don't believe in the sacred. We believe that what we see is what we get, the scientific paradigm. I'm very excited to explore with people who come from that kind of a background, possibly, what this beautiful, beautiful thing is, and to go into it, Sarah.
Yeah, and I mean, what you're saying really, really strikes a chord, because there is this thirst. There is a modern thirst, and it's rising to connect with some sort of sacredness. My experience and working with publishers and writers and people who are looking for stories all the time is that, there's a disconnect. There's a disconnect with essential wildness of the earth. And so there's a deep calling of the soul, and a thirst for some meaning. And I love what you say about these stories having that soul, and it is that way. And the other thing that I was thinking about it, and which we mentioned earlier, is that it brings to life the universe. It makes a universe an animate universe, and it also associates specialness with things, and soul with things, and messages with things that we regard as not having soul or message or specialness or sacredness.
Yes. Yes.
So
and I think it's exactly that, Sarah. And I think one of the mistakes we make is that we think that we are disconnected from a mythology. We may read a mythology, and we may think, oh, wonderful, and it happened in the olden days, and it happened with the gods, and it happened with all of that. But we say, well, we're modern Western people, and we don't connect with mythology. But these kind of, what they do is they take you as an individual into mythology itself, and you experience mythology. And what I'm really interested in is, when working with people, when we tell our own stories, are we able to mythologize our own stories, to find the components that make these stories so alive, and bring them into our own day-to-day lives, be it writers. Is this the way that writers can work? And I know some writers who do, and I think it's a rare skill. But also those people who are into the narration of stories, or just at a party, when you're telling your story, what is it that makes your story something that people take home and go, wow, that was really something? I'm very interested in that.
So, Neil, you, for those who don't know you, you are what we call in South Africa Sangoma Niall. You're a medicine man. Some people would call you a shaman. And obviously, this has been your life work for so many years. You have grown up in these traditions and deeply studied and apprenticed, and now obviously are a very senior teacher in this work. And to what extent, Neil, do you actually immerse yourself into the wilderness, and what does it feed, and what does it give you? Because I know you're there now in Botswana in the bush, and what's different? I'm sitting in Cape Town, I'm around, I'm in my house, and there you are out in the wild. And what can we expect when we step out of our conventional lives? What could be different when we
Sarah, one of the fundamental things for me about nature and the wilderness is that when you step into it in an unencumbered way, and when I say unencumbered, I mean not when we go glamping or camping or go to safari, but when you step into nature and you go just as yourself with very little. Nature is in charge. And as soon as nature is in charge, you become a subject of nature. You become a part of nature. And as soon as you're a part of nature, you start hearing nature. Nature communicates. There's a dialogue that happens between yourself and those things around you. And for me, going into the bush, that is the most special thing. So I come to, you mentioned my work and what I do. I come to replenish myself in my work. I come to listen. Earlier on, I said I come to listen to all people in the community, but I also go to listen to nature itself. I go to listen to what is going on with the environment, what feedback the environment is given, and listen to the stories that come out of there, because those stories, they give clues into what it is that we human beings need. You're sitting in Cape Town right now, you're sitting in an urban area. My experience of urban areas is I start to feel depleted. I start to feel tired. I feel like the life force becomes low in me. As soon as I go into nature, it's like my battery is becoming recharged. And when I look into that, it's like, what is it that I'm getting from there? I'm getting life force, but I'm also getting what are the questions that I have. I wonder about the meaning of life. I wonder about my own context in the world. Who am I? What am I? Why am I? And going into nature and communing with nature really helps me with that. I start to understand that. And then later, when I go back to an urban setting, I sit with the people who come to see me in my work, and they're asking the same kind of questions. I have responses for them. I don't say I have answers, but I do have responses for them. And, where I've charged my battery, sometimes other people can a little bit of their battery off with me.
So we are going to be going to Morocco in March 2020, and really,
and I'm so excited.
Totally, I'm excited. I haven't been there since I was. I won't tell you what age, but it was about 15 years ago. And really, and the reason I chose Morocco as one of the venues I wanted us to talk about story is the ancient how of that land, of the deserts, and the expanses out there. And also because I just think it's a calling to some kind of adventure where we can step out of our norm, because I don't think we have a lot of opportunities in our modern environments where we have to be productive and effective and busy. And sometimes we just don't have that thing that draws us to go, you are going on another adventure into another world. You're stepping out of your life. You're going to become something different. You are going to speak different languages. You are going to hear things that you have never heard before. And maybe it's an opportunity for you to go back into your life when you leave in a different way. And I found that of every adventure I've been on. And that's why I so actively crave and book adventures, because I can't find that necessarily in my modern busy life as a mother of teenagers, racing around, being effective, getting deals, talking and being functional. So we're inviting you to come with us, and it's in March 2020. I know there were a few questions, Neil, because we're obviously sending this recording to a lot of people. And the first question was, do you have to be a writer? So I think I'm going to address that one. And
I think that's your one, sir.
That's mine. So you don't have to be a writer. No, stories are much bigger than the writing of them. So stories are going to be in the air, in the land, in the soil, in the water. And we are not expecting you to be writing, but we are asking of you to find some way of expressing your own stories or processing it. So it could be in poetry. You may be journaling. You may want to bring, as one writer is, paints and musical instruments. That's very welcome. And of course, Anil, a lot of stories are told in music in Morocco. So that's quite an exciting element. So no, you don't have to write at all, but the invitation is to write, because I believe that sometimes in writing your story, something quite magical happens. Sometimes thinking doesn't have the same process as actually a physical embodiment, and writing is a physical thing. You're creating, you're making words that have meaning, and words upon words upon words make a story. And that can be very special. And then what other questions did we have? Let me see. Will we have personal time with Neil? That was the one question that somebody sent to me now. Because of course we do know that Neil is very sought after. So people do come from all over the world to spend time with him in the wilderness in Botswana, visit him in Cape Town where he has a practice down here. And he is obviously one of the foremost ancestral communicators. So I asked Neil earlier, and he said that he will not be taking to Morocco his bones, because obviously in his divination practice, he often uses bones. He's not going to be doing those things. So the one-on-one time is going to be an immersion with the group and with the classes we do and the seminars and the conversations and the stories. So of course, just by virtue of being together for 10 days, the one-on-one time is immense in the sense of we are there together. And of course, then we have group stuff that we'll be doing as a group, as a band of adventurers all together. Some of them will be storytelling related. Some of them will be outings. We're going to either go for a walk in the Hightless Mountains, a trek, to a hammam, where we really immerse in the local cultures. And what else, Neil? What's your draw to Morocco? What would you most like to do, either during or after we all gather?
I've never been to Morocco, sir. I've never been to Morocco, and Morocco has been on my bucket list for absolute ever. So I'm tremendously excited about this. But I've read a lot about Morocco, and I've researched a lot about Morocco. And as you said earlier on, it's a very ancient culture. And there's a lot that goes on under the surface. There's a lot that goes on the surface, and I think we're just going to be busy with scratching the surface before we even need to go deep. So I'm really excited about that. And I think, just to add to what you said about personal time, I've got some very exciting things to bring with me to Morocco. Aside from bones and shamanic paraphernalia, I've got some very exciting things to play with. And I think that we are going to have a lot of fun, and we're also going to have a lot of very deep experience with the stuff that, between me and you, Sarah, we have been putting together for a little while now. I think that we have a exciting program, and I think that people are going to come out of there feeling, okay, no, I'm feeling really fulfilled. I got it, even if there isn't one-on-one personal time. I think Morocco in itself is going to do a lot of that for us.
Yeah, absolutely. So all the information I will drop in the link that will be below this, and you all know how to find us because it'll be in the link. And all those details we will communicate. And then, Neil, what I also just wanted to share was my interest in storytelling, which obviously began in the written form and has now moved into verbal and oral storytelling. Really was sparked about 4 years ago in Greece, when I was running a writer's retreat on an island, and we had a traditional Greek storyteller come. And we sat late one night on the beach around a fire. There was a few glasses of terrible Greek wine going around, and she told us stories very late into the night about grief and about loss. And I had been through a very difficult time. I had lost my husband, and I hadn't really known... I hadn't had words for grief, and the way she shared in this very archetypal story that was, about it was a Indian, what do they call it, an Alaskan story from very, very a long time ago, and that for me, when I left that place, I just cried deep tears because it had touched something in me, witnessing this ancient story of a woman 500 years ago who had been through something that, I hadn't been able to put words to. So I think that's just the absolute power of these things, is opening those little...
I think you're absolutely right in that, Sarah.
Yeah.
You come from the part where you're moving into story from writing, and I'm going in the opposite direction. I'm moving more towards writing. I aspire one day to write something, and I don't want to write other people's stories. I want to write the stories of the things that I've seen with my own eyes. And I'm also very interested in what you're saying about how stories they can teach us something, and they can share with us something which we don't know how to work with. And I'm very interested in those kind of stories, and we'll be talking about those kind of things. It's very exciting, that for me.
Okay, wonderful. So many of you have sent little technical questions, which I'm not going to address now, about, deposits and all of that sort of thing. So we can address those on email. So I'm just going to sign off because we promised it would only be just under 30 minutes, and it has been.
Yes.
So, and you'll all be getting the recording, because I know so many of you have wanted, and you're into different time zones. So people are going to be joining us from all over the world. It's going to be a mad bunch of adventurers gathering, like nomadic tribes people almost.
Yes, it is.
Oh, how wonderful.
The gathering of the tribes.
So we hope to see you in Morocco in March, and please drop me a line if you have any questions about it. Thank you all.
Great. Join us in
Thank
Morocco.
you, Neil.
Thank you.
And good night.
Thank you, Sarah. Good night.